When people hear ancient Egypt, they often think of tombs. And the answer sounds simple. Egyptians believed in the afterlife. But the real purpose of tombs goes further than that. A tomb could protect a body, yes, but it could also protect a name, a role, a memory. So let's explore it quietly, step by step, and see what these monuments were truly built to do. Ancient Egypt is often reduced to one image, a pyramid resting under a wide, quiet sky. And the usual explanation sounds simple. Egyptians built tombs because they believed in the afterlife. That is true, but it is not the whole reason. In Egypt, a tomb was not only a place to bury a body, it was a place designed to keep something going. A name, a role, a presence, a connection between generations. And for kings, the tomb also carried another message. The country was still stable, even when a ruler died. So in this calm walk through history, the question is not only, where were people buried? The question is, what work did a tomb do? To begin, it helps to understand one core idea that shaped Egyptian thinking. The world was meant to stay in balance. The Nile returned in a steady rhythm. The fields drank the floodwater and turned green. The sun crossed the sky and came back again. These patterns felt like proof that life could be ordered, that the universe could be steady. But death threatened that steadiness, not only because someone was gone, but because a link could break. The link between the living and the dead. The link between memory and identity. The link between society and its sense of continuity. So Egyptians built tombs as a way to manage that break, to make loss feel contained, to make identity feel durable, to turn the end of one life into something that could be carried forward without chaos. In modern life, a grave is often private, a name, a date, a quiet place. In ancient Egypt, a tomb could be active. It could receive visitors. It could hold rituals. It could display titles. It could preserve images. It could support offerings. It could keep a person's story readable. That is why the purpose of tombs is not one single thing. It is layered. A tomb protected the dead. A tomb guided memory. A tomb organized responsibility. A tomb displayed status. A tomb connected family duty to public identity. And in the background, always, there was a deeper goal, continuity. Continuity of a name, so it could still be spoken. Continuity of an identity, so it would not fade. Continuity of order, so the world would still feel stable. This goal shaped everything. The architecture, the inscriptions, the art, the placement, the materials, the rituals, and it also created a quiet tension that runs through Egyptian history. A tomb needed to be known so remembrance could continue, but a tomb also needed to be protected because disturbance was a real danger. That tension will appear again and again as tombs change across time. But first, it helps to look at how Egyptians understood the self. Because when identity is seen as something made of several parts, it becomes clearer why a tomb had to be more than a hole in the ground. The body mattered because it anchored identity. The name mattered because it kept a person distinct. Images mattered because an image could stand in for the person. Rituals mattered because they maintained the link between the living world and the continued existence beyond it. So a tomb became a carefully designed interface between worlds. a place where the living could still offer respect and where the dead could still remain present in culture and memory. If you have heard the phrase "house of eternity," it points in the right direction. But the tomb was also something like a bridge and something like an institution. It was built to operate. And once this is understood, the famous monuments of Egypt become less like mysteries and more like deliberate solutions. Solutions to fear, to loss, to instability, and to the question of what it means to last. In Egyptian belief, a person was not only a body and not only a spirit. A person was understood as something layered, something that could be preserved, supported, or weakened depending on what happened after death. This is one reason names appear everywhere inside tombs, on walls, on coffins, on statues, on small objects. Sometimes the name is repeated again and again, because the name had to remain readable, repeatable, intact. To lose the name was to risk fading, and fading was not only sadness, it was danger. So the tomb became a place built for remembrance, but also for survival. That idea connects to offerings. Many tombs included a chapel or offering space, a small area where visitors could stand, speak, and place gifts. Bread, beer, water, flowers, incense. Sometimes the space was simple, sometimes richly carved, but the purpose was steady, to keep a relationship between the living and the dead active. Even when no real food was placed there, images and lists could matter. Bread, beer, jars of oil, meat, cloth, perfume, clean linen. Sometimes these lists are long and precise, almost like inventories. This was not decoration for its own sake. It was a way of stating what should continue, a promise made visible. In their worldview, the dead still needed support, not in the exact same way as the living, but in a way that felt real inside their system of meaning. So the tomb became a link. The living gave offerings and respect. The dead remained present, honored, secure. The dead could also be understood as protective ancestors, names with weight, presences that could bring blessing rather than disorder. This is also why tomb walls often show calm scenes of daily life, fields being worked, grain being measured, bread being baked, beer being poured, boats moving across water, herds counted, craftspeople shaping tools and ornaments, servants bringing goods, musicians playing, families gathered in formal poses. At first, these scenes can look like nostalgia, a memory of life, but they are also a statement. This life continues. The tomb carried a steady picture of existence forward, framed in images that did not easily change. And when you scale this up to the king, the meaning grows larger. A pharaoh's death was not only personal, it was political. The ruler was tied to the stability of the country itself. The king's role linked society to divine order. So the tomb of a king had to show something important, that the system still held, that authority remained legitimate, that the rhythm of the world could continue without collapse. This is one reason royal tombs became monumental. They were not only built for the king, they were built for the living population as well. They reassured, they unified, they demonstrated control, they made stability visible. But monumentality creates a new problem. When a tomb is visible, it is easier to remember and easier to find. And if a tomb contains valuables, and if it contains a preserved body, then it becomes a target. So another quiet tension enters the story. Memory versus security. You want the tomb to be known, so offerings continue. But you also want the burial protected, so disturbance is less likely. Egyptian history is full of solutions to this tension, from architectural tricks to hidden chambers to guarded valleys. And to understand those solutions, we need to look at how tomb designs changed over time. Egyptian tombs are shaped by a constant balancing act. On one side is remembrance. You want the dead to be remembered, because remembrance sustains identity. If offerings are meant to continue, the tomb must be reachable. If a name is meant to stay present, the tomb must be visible in some way, even if only to a small circle of family and caretakers. On the other side is protection. You want the burial secured because disturbance was a real danger. If valuables and the preserved body are inside, the tomb becomes a target. And if the burial is violated, then the continuity the tomb was meant to defend is placed at risk. So Egyptian tomb design often tries to do both. A public face for ritual, a hidden core for protection. Early elite tombs were often mastabas, rectangular structures with flat tops built above a burial shaft. Simple from the outside, more complex beneath. The burial chamber could be deep below ground, difficult to reach, difficult to disturb. Above, there could be an offering place where names, titles, and images remained accessible. Later, royal tombs grew into pyramids, not only because Egypt could mobilize labor, but because the shape itself communicated meaning. A pyramid catches light, it dominates the horizon, it suggests a connection between earth and sky, between the human world and a cosmic order. But the pyramid also communicates state power. A project like that requires planning, skilled labor, quarrying, transport, food supply, administration, accounting, time. So a pyramid is not only a religious building, it is also proof that a state can organize thousands of people with discipline and consistency. Around many pyramids, there is an entire complex: temples, causeways, storage areas, workshops, subsidiary graves, spaces for ongoing rituals. This reveals something important. A royal tomb was not just a burial spot. It could function like an institution. Rituals could continue for years. Priests and staff could maintain offerings. Festivals could include ceremonies connected to the dead king. The tomb complex became part of the state's public rhythm and part of the landscape's official story. But visibility has a cost. A monument that can be seen from far away can be approached from far away. And across time, tomb robbing becomes a repeated problem. Wealth draws attention, curiosity draws attention, instability draws attention. So later, Egypt increasingly shifted toward hidden tombs, especially for royalty. Tombs were cut into rock, placed in cliffs and valleys, tucked into landscapes that were harder to access and easier to guard. This was not necessarily a change in belief. It was a change in risk management. Even a society with strong spiritual traditions still faced practical realities: theft, disturbance, decay. So Egyptians used engineering and planning to support spiritual goals. They sealed corridors, disguised entrances, blocked shafts, designed chambers that were difficult to reach. At the same time, they still needed remembrance. So the public side of ritual might shift to temples and dedicated offering spaces, while the burial itself became more hidden. The purpose remained steady, the method changed, and behind it is a calm human logic. Endurance requires both memory and protection. A tomb must be known, and it must be secure. That is why Egyptian tombs can feel both welcoming and guarded at the same time. Open courtyards and sealed chambers, painted walls and hidden shafts, public ritual spaces and secret burial rooms. The design itself is a map of competing needs, balanced carefully over time. There is a common misunderstanding that Egyptian tombs were built mainly to store treasure. It is true that elite tombs could contain valuable objects, jewelry, fine containers, furniture, cosmetics, tools, rare materials. But the deeper idea was not simple wealth. The deeper idea was continuity of life. Many objects placed in tombs are practical, things a person used: clothing, mirrors, combs, jars, bowls, writing tools, small pieces of furniture. Even when objects look ceremonial, they often still point back to daily needs: cleanliness, nourishment, comfort, work, identity. In other words, the tomb is not only a storage room, it is a constructed portrait. It preserves a person's name, role, and status. It preserves a version of their world. It preserves the idea that life continues in a stable form, not as chaos, but as order. This is why inscriptions often focus on titles and duties. A person is remembered not only as a body, but as a position in society: an overseer, a scribe, a priest, a manager of storehouses, a trusted official. The tomb becomes a record of belonging. I existed, I served, I mattered, I was part of order. This is also why tomb building reinforced hierarchy. The larger and more durable the tomb, the clearer the status. Stone, labor, and skilled carving were expensive, so permanence itself became a signal of power. At a national scale, royal tombs amplified this. A ruler who builds enduring monuments becomes difficult to forget. A dynasty that shapes the landscape shapes the public narrative. Permanence becomes a political asset. A monumental tomb says authority is stable and the state can command resources across time. But even private tombs, smaller and more personal, carry the same quiet goal: to resist disappearance, to keep a name present, to keep the link between generations active, to turn memory into something structured and lasting. When you look closely at tomb art, you notice how calm it often feels. Even scenes with movement, boats, hunting, animals, fields, are arranged with balance. Figures are organized, space is controlled, the tone is steady. That steadiness is not accidental. The tomb is designed to say something simple and powerful: order holds. And this returns us to the core thesis. Egyptian tombs were not only about death, they were about controlling time. They tried to make a person last. They tried to make a family last. They tried to make the state last. They tried to make order last. That is why tomb architecture changes across centuries. It is a long experiment in lasting. Visibility supports remembrance, but increases risk. Concealment supports protection, but can weaken public offerings and memory. Different periods balance those pressures differently, but the underlying aim remains the same. The tomb is a structure built against fading, and because Egypt invested so much in permanence, we can still study their world today, not as a rumor, but as a record. By the end of this topic, Egyptian tombs begin to feel less like mysteries and more like answers. How does a society face death without letting it collapse the world of the living? Ancient Egypt answered by building structures that carried meaning forward. A tomb preserved identity through name and image. A tomb supported ritual and offerings. A tomb bound families through responsibility. A tomb displayed status and legitimacy, and at the scale of kings, a tomb helped the state appear stable across generations. So the real purpose of tombs was continuity. Continuity of the person, so a name would not fade. Continuity of the family, so duties and remembrance could pass on. Continuity of society, so roles and hierarchies remained clear. Continuity of order, so the universe felt steady even when life ended. This is why Egyptian tombs are filled with repetition, repeated names, repeated scenes, repeated symbols, repeated lists. Repetition is not boredom here, it is reinforcement. It presses identity into time, again and again, until it becomes difficult to erase. This is also why Egyptians cared so much about durability. Stone lasts, carved text lasts, painted scenes, protected from light and weather, can last a long time. If the goal is to remain present, then the material matters. The tomb becomes a strategy against forgetting. At the same time, Egypt's tomb tradition shows realism. People worried about theft and disturbance. They adjusted designs, they hid entrances, they sealed corridors, they moved burials into remote valleys. Belief did not remove risk, it simply gave risk a different meaning and demanded better solutions. Over centuries, those solutions created variety. Mastabas, pyramids, rock-cut chambers, hidden tombs, temple complexes, different shapes, different places, different styles, but one shared intention: to make a life endure. And this is why tombs still matter now. They keep people present. They preserve faces, names, and stories. They preserve records of work and celebration. They preserve a society's sense of what was valuable. food and craft, family and duty, status and service, stability and order. When you stand before Egyptian tomb art, even in a photograph, you can sense the calm control of it. The figures are arranged, the world is made readable. The scenes feel as if they are meant to continue without disruption. And that is the tomb speaking, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, with structure. It says, a person can remain, a name can be held, order can continue. Perhaps that is why these monuments still affect people today. They still perform their original work. They keep memory alive. They keep a civilization speaking quietly through stone.